The first time I saw thoughts crystallize in the air, I was cleaning the sacred vessels in the temple of Thoth. They drifted like golden pollen motes in the pre-dawn light, and I assumed lack of sleep had finally broken my mind. 3 days of fasting will do that to an acolyte. But when High Priest Amenemhat swept into the chamber, his eyes locked onto the same shimmering particles, and I watched his weathered face transform with an emotion I'd never seen before. Fear. "Close your eyes, Knum," he commanded, his voice barely above a whisper. "Whatever you do, don't think about what you just saw." Of course, telling someone not to think about something guarantees it will consume their thoughts entirely. The golden motes multiplied, swirling faster now, coalescing into tight spirals that pulsed with an inner light. They were beautiful, mesmerizing, and hungry. That was 6 months ago. Now I know the truth about our temples, our rituals, and the real purpose of the massive stone monuments that pierce the sky along the Nile. The pyramids aren't tombs. They never were. They're processing centers for the most valuable resource in the known universe: conscious energy. The ancient scrolls call it chiasins, the distilled power of human thought and dreams. For millennia, the priesthood has carefully cultivated this energy, using sacred geometries and precisely aligned structures to collect, refine, and store it. The endless cycles of prayers, the elaborate ceremonies, the carefully choreographed festival processions, all designed to generate specific thought patterns that could be harvested. It was a delicate agricultural operation on an unprecedented scale. Every aspect of Egyptian society was carefully engineered to maximize thought production. The complex mythology, the strict hierarchies, the obsession with death and the afterlife, all of it served to create the perfect cognitive conditions for growing chiasins. The gods didn't give us writing. Amenemhat told me during my initiation into the inner mysteries. We developed it to stabilize thought patterns across generations. Every hieroglyph is a seed crystal for specific forms of consciousness. He showed me the hidden chambers beneath the temples where priests worked with pure chiasins, distilling it into various forms: creativity, inspiration, raw intellectual power, even something they called destiny potential. The golden motes I'd seen were just the crudest, most visible manifestation. The refined versions were far more potent and dangerous. But why? I asked. What do we use it for? Amenemhat's face darkened. Originally, everything. It powered our civilization's greatest achievements. How do you think we built the pyramids? Moved stones weighing hundreds of tons? Developed mathematics and astronomy millennia ahead of other cultures? Chiasins amplifies human capability beyond imagination. He paused, glancing nervously at the temple's ceiling. But we're not the only ones who know its value anymore. They found us. The they he referred to were the thought merchants, entities that existed in dimensions adjacent to our own, drawn to Earth by the unique signature of industrialized consciousness cultivation. They first appeared to the priesthood during the reign of Ramesses II, offering advanced knowledge in exchange for small quantities of refined chiasins. It seemed like a favorable arrangement at first. The thought merchants taught us new techniques for increasing yield, showed us how to access deeper layers of human consciousness, revealed secrets about the nature of reality itself. But with each transaction, their demands grew larger, and their true nature became clearer. They're farmers, Amenemhat explained, and they see Earth as unutilized agricultural land. We're not partners. We're primitive natives sitting on valuable territory. They want to transform the entire planet into a thought plantation. The implications were horrifying. The thought merchants' industrial-scale harvesting techniques would strip humans of all but the most basic consciousness, leaving empty shells capable only of generating raw chiasins. They had done it to other worlds before, leaving behind civilizations of spiritually lobotomized beings, endlessly generating thought energy for their cosmic masters. That's when I learned the real purpose of the priesthood in our time. We weren't just growing and harvesting chiasins. We were carefully controlling its signature, keeping production at levels that wouldn't attract more attention from the thought merchants. The elaborate temples, the public rituals, all of it was a carefully maintained facade hiding our true work, protecting humanity from psychic colonization. But someone had made a mistake. The golden motes I'd seen that morning were evidence that our containment was failing. Somewhere in the vast network of temples and pyramids, raw essence was leaking into visible reality. And I knew with a certainty that chilled my blood that we weren't the only ones who noticed. I spent the next months learning everything I could about Kyasin's cultivation and containment. Amenemhat taught me the secret geometries, the thought-focusing meditations, the precise arrangements of crystals and metals that could channel and store conscious energy. But more importantly, he taught me about the warning signs. Watch for changes in the collective dreams, he said. When too many people start having the same visions, especially of lights in the sky or voices calling from beneath the earth, they're trying to break through. The warning signs were increasing. Reports came from temples up and down the Nile of people walking in their sleep, of children speaking in unknown languages, of strange shadows moving against the wind. The thought merchants were testing our defenses, looking for weaknesses. Then came the night of the red moon. I was monitoring the quiescence levels in the pyramid's main processing chamber when the readings spiked off the charts. The air itself seemed to vibrate with potential energy. Through the alignment shaft that pointed at the North Star, I saw it, a dark shape moving across the crimson face of the moon, geometric and impossible. Their harvester had arrived. Before I could sound the alarm, every crystal in the chamber shattered simultaneously. The carefully contained chiasins burst free, swirling into complex patterns that hurt my eyes to look at. And in those patterns, I began to see faces, thousands of them, alien and hungry, pressing against the membrane of reality. The final battle for humanity's consciousness was about to begin, and I was the only one awake to witness the first strike. As the crimson moon loomed overhead and alien geometries pressed against reality's edge, my mind was suddenly flooded with images. Whether triggered by the surging chiasins or implanted by the desperate priesthood of ages past, I saw the beginning of everything, the moment when humans first learned to farm thoughts. It began with a dream walker named Imhotep, 30 generations before my time. History remembers him as an architect, physician, and high priest, but these were merely reflections of his true discovery. In the ancient scrolls kept in the deepest vault beneath the Temple of Thoth, his original journal remains, written in a form of hieroglyphics, so old that only 7 people alive know how to read them. In the 3rd month of the flood season, under the eye of the full moon, I followed a dreamer's path too far. Imhotep had been experimenting with sacred herbs and meditation techniques, seeking ways to enter the dreams of the sick to better heal them. But on that night, he pushed beyond individual dreams into something else, a layer of reality where thoughts took physical form. The air itself was alive with countless motes of light, each one a crystallized moment of consciousness. They drifted like seeds in the wind, but responded to the direction of my will. When I gathered them together, they sparked with power that made my very soul tremble. He discovered that these thought crystals could be collected, concentrated, and even stored in properly prepared vessels. Different thoughts had different properties. Dreams of flying created crystals that made objects lighter, while thoughts of strength could be distilled into power that made the impossible possible. At first, Imhotep kept his discoveries secret, using small amounts of collected thought energy to enhance his healing abilities. But he soon realized that the massive construction project ordered by King Djoser, what would become the step pyramid of Saqqara, presented an unprecedented opportunity. I have convinced the king that certain geometric shapes are sacred to the gods, that the angles must be precise, the measurements perfect. He does not understand that we are building more than a monument. We are building a lens for the soul of Egypt itself. The step pyramid was the first thought farm, designed to collect and focus the mental energy of thousands of workers, amplified by their sense of purpose and religious awe. But it was crude, inefficient. Each successive pyramid refined the technique, incorporating new discoveries about the relationship between physical geometry and mental energy. Today we found that thoughts of eternity, when properly crystallized, can alter the very substance of stone. The workers believe they are dragging massive blocks up earthen ramps, but in truth we are teaching the rocks to move themselves, powered by the concentrated dreams of immortality we have gathered. But Imhotep's journals grew darker as his understanding deepened. He began to sense that humanity's thoughts were not alone in the universe. Other forms of consciousness brushed against our reality, drawn to the growing accumulation of chiasins, like moths to a flame. They speak to me in dreams, offering knowledge beyond imagining. But there is hunger in their voices, and when they think I am not looking, I see the worlds they have already harvested. We must learn to hide what we are growing here. The final entries in Imhotep's journal detailed his desperate race to develop protection methods, ways to mask the signature of gathered chiasins, and establish the priesthood as guardians rather than just farmers. He created a system of distributed collection, using smaller temples to gather thought energy in amounts too small to draw attention, then transferring it through secret channels to hidden storage chambers. The Great Pyramids must go dark. Let the world think them mere tombs. We will maintain them only as decoys while we build our true network in secret. I have seen what comes for worlds that shine too brightly in the higher dimensions. May those who follow me understand we are no longer cultivating power. We are cultivating survival. The vision released me as suddenly as it had come, leaving me gasping on the chamber floor. But now I understood something crucial. The crystals in this chamber hadn't shattered by accident or attack. They were responding to a pattern laid down by Imhotep himself, a final failsafe triggered only in moments of supreme crisis. He had left us a weapon, hidden in plain sight for thousands of years. The pyramids weren't just processors or storage vessels. When properly activated, they formed a vast geometric web capable of focusing all of Egypt's mental energy into a single point. The only question was, did I have enough time to figure out how to use it before the thought merchants broke through? The red moon was sinking toward the horizon, and in its dying light, the impossible shapes were growing clearer, more solid. Somewhere in this chamber was the key to activating Imhotep's final defense. And somewhere in my inherited memories was the knowledge to find it. The chamber's remaining crystals hummed with increasing intensity as I searched frantically for Imhotep's trigger mechanism. Each passing moment brought new distortions in the air, reality rippling like the surface of the Nile during flood season. Through the alignment shaft, I could see the geometric shapes dancing around the blood-red moon growing more substantial, as if they were slowly pushing through a membrane between worlds. Time was running out. Think, I muttered, pressing my palms against the cool limestone walls. What would Imhotep have built that could last thousands of years? Something that wouldn't be discovered accidentally, but would be obvious to someone who knew where to look. The inherited memories from the vision swirled in my mind, fragments of ancient knowledge fighting to surface. Imhotep's voice echoed, "The power lies not in the stone, but in the spaces between. Look for the pattern in the void." I swept my torch across the chamber walls, studying not the hieroglyphs and carvings, but the careful gaps between them. Slowly, a subtle geometry emerged. The negative space formed a complex spiral, virtually invisible unless you knew to look for it. At its center was a seemingly blank section of wall. But it wasn't blank at all. Pulling out my copper divining rod, a tool we use to measure chiasin's concentrations, I held it up to the wall. The rod began to vibrate, then spin, tracking an invisible pattern carved into the stone. Not carved with chisels, but with concentrated thought energy, the marks only visible to instruments attuned to chiasins. "Clever," I whispered, hidden in a spectrum only the initiated could see. The pattern was a series of nested circles, each containing symbols from a script far older than hieroglyphics. I recognized it from the vision, the original language of consciousness farming, designed to directly affect the structure of thought itself. But the symbols were unlike any I'd seen in my training. These were meant for growing or harvesting. They were weapons, geometric spells engineered to turn chiasins itself into a defensive barrier. A deep thrumming began to pulse through the pyramid, so low it made my bones ache. Above, the alien geometries were nearly solid now, their impossible angles hurting my eyes as they pressed against our reality. I could hear whispers at the edge of my mind, promises of power and knowledge if I would just stop what I was doing, just wait a little longer. I gritted my teeth and pressed my hands against the carved circles. The whispers turned to shrieks of alarm as the pattern began to glow with a deep, golden light. Chiasins streamed from the remaining storage crystals, flowing into the ancient circuit I had activated. But something was wrong. The energy was draining too quickly, the glow already starting to fade. The pattern needed more power than I had available. The chamber's reserves weren't enough. Then I remembered Amenemhat's lessons about the true nature of the pyramids. They were all connected, linked by invisible lines of force that crisscrossed the Nile Valley. If I could tap into that network, I pressed my forehead against the wall, forcing my consciousness to expand the way I'd been taught. Beyond the chamber, beyond the pyramid, I could sense the other nodes in the ancient defense grid. Most were dormant, but not dead. They just needed to be awakened. Focusing all my mental energy, I sent out a pulse of quiescence through the network, a signal that carried not just power, but memory. The vision Imhotep had planted in the fail-safe, showing the danger and the way to fight it. For a moment, nothing happened. The alien geometries were almost completely manifested now, their edges crystallizing into something that resembled a vast, angular machine, hovering above the Nile Valley. The harvest was about to begin. Then, far to the south, I felt it, a response. The pyramid at Luxor was awakening. Then Karnak. Then Dasher. One by one, the nodes in the ancient network sparked to life, each adding its power to the circuit. Quiescence began to flow like a river of light through the patterns Imhotep had carved. The chamber blazed with golden radiance, as thousands of years of carefully hidden thought energy poured through the awakened network. The defensive patterns grew bright enough to shine through the solid stone, projecting their geometry into the sky above Egypt. I heard the thought merchant's machine scream, not with sound, but with a psychic shriek that made reality itself shudder. The impossible angles of their harvester began to warp and bend as Imhotep's defense grid projected a countergeometry, a pattern engineered to be fundamentally incompatible with their technology. But we weren't trying to destroy them. The weapon was designed to do something far more subtle. It was rewriting the fundamental equations that made Earth's consciousness farmable, like changing the mineral content of soil to make it impossible for certain crops to grow. The harvester's crystalline edges began to dissolve as it lost purchase on our reality. The thought merchant psychic screams turned from rage to confusion to fear as they realized what was happening. Earth was becoming toxic to their kind of consciousness farming. As the last traces of the harvester faded from our skies, I felt the defense grid complete its work. The patterns carved by Imhotep had permanently altered Earth's psychic chemistry. We were still capable of producing quiescence, but it would be forever poisonous to the thought merchant's methods of industrial-scale harvesting. The immediate danger was past, but I knew our work was far from over. The thought merchants wouldn't give up such a precious resource easily. They would look for other ways to access human consciousness, try to find methods to bypass or undo Imhotep's protection. And we would need to be ready. The chamber grew quiet as the defense grid powered down, the golden light fading to a subtle glow. But now I could see other patterns hidden in the walls, training manuals, tactical assessments, technology we would need for the battles to come. Imhotep hadn't just given us a weapon, he'd given us a way to fight back. Dawn was breaking over the Nile, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. Somewhere in the distance, temple drums began to beat, calling the people to morning prayers. They would never know how close we had come to losing everything, or what had just been sacrificed to keep them safe. But as I watched the sun rise on a permanently changed Earth, I wondered, had we truly won our freedom, or had we just graduated from simple thought farming to something far more complex? A species learning to harvest and weaponize its own consciousness? Only time would tell. 1 year after the night of the red moon, I stood atop the Great Pyramid at dawn, watching quiescence drift like morning mist across the Nile Valley. The golden motes were visible to everyone now, a side effect of Imhotep's defense system that we couldn't hide. The priests had adapted quickly, incorporating this new reality into our teachings. They were signs of the god's blessing, we said, made visible to remind people of the divine's constant presence. It wasn't entirely a lie. The morning harvest looks promising, Amenemhat said, appearing silently beside me. He had survived that night in the temple of Karnak, helping to activate that node of the defense grid. The experience had left him changed. Streaks of silver now ran through his dark hair, and his eyes held a peculiar luminescence in certain lights. Too promising, I replied, gesturing at the dense clouds of consciousness crystals rising from Alexandria. We're producing more crescents than ever before. The defense grid made it impossible for the thought merchants to harvest it industrially, but we've become more efficient farmers than they ever were, he finished, nodding grimly. It was true. The events of that night had altered more than just Earth's psychic chemistry. The activation of the defense grid had awakened something in humanity's collective consciousness. People were dreaming more vividly, thinking more deeply. Children were being born with natural abilities that used to take priests decades to develop. The old networks of temples and pyramids were straining to contain the increased production of chiasins. We had begun building new structures, incorporating Imhotep's geometries into homes and public spaces, turning all of Egypt into one vast consciousness management system. Have you decoded more of the wall patterns? Amenemhat asked, though I knew he already had the answer. Yes. They're not just defensive protocols, they're plans. Imhotep knew this would happen. The defense grid was just the first stage. He left us blueprints for something much larger. I pulled out a scroll covered in my careful copies of the thought script. He called it the Consciousness Cultivation Initiative, a way to deliberately guide humanity's psychic evolution. The thought merchants saw us as crops to be harvested, but Imhotep saw something else. A species on the verge of learning to farm itself. Amenemhat was quiet for a long moment, watching the chiasins swirl in increasingly complex patterns above the awakening city. And you believe we're ready for this responsibility? I believe we don't have a choice. The changes are happening whether we guide them or not. And we're not the only ones who noticed. Reports have been coming in from distant lands, Sumer, Indus, Chinese kingdoms. Other civilizations were discovering their own methods of consciousness cultivation. Some were peaceful, developing techniques similar to our own. Others were more aggressive, experimenting with ways to harvest chiasins from unwilling minds. The thought merchants may return, I continued, but they're not our greatest concern anymore. We need to prepare humanity for what comes next. And what is that exactly? I unrolled another scroll, this one showing the final set of patterns I decoded from Imhotep's hidden archive. The geometry was staggering in its complexity, a blueprint for transforming not just Egypt, but the entire planet into an integrated consciousness cultivation system. Evolution, I said simply. The thought merchants treated consciousness as a resource to be extracted, but Imhotep understood its true nature. It's a seed, and we're finally learning how to grow it. The sun climbed higher, turning the drifting chiasins into rivers of light flowing between the pyramids. In homes and temples throughout Egypt, people were beginning their morning rituals, unknowingly contributing to the greatest agricultural project in human history. Every prayer, every dream, every moment of wonder or revelation was adding to something larger than any individual could comprehend. We were no longer just thought farmers. We had become thought gardeners, cultivating not for harvest, but for growth. The real question was, what would humanity become when we finally bloomed? As if in answer, a child's laugh echoed from the city below, and for a moment, the chiasins above her home crystallized into an impossible pattern, one that, according to all our ancient knowledge, shouldn't have been achievable for another 1,000 years. Amenemhat and I exchanged glances. The future was arriving faster than even Imhotep had predicted. We had survived the thought merchants only to face an even greater challenge, guiding humanity through its own transformation into something entirely new. The sun reached its full morning glory, and I began my descent from the pyramid. There was work to be done. The greatest harvest in human history was just beginning. And this time, we were both the farmers and the crop. In the distance, dawn light caught the drifting chiasins just right, and for a moment it looked like the whole Nile Valley was one vast field of golden wheat, swaying in a wind that blew from humanity's future. We had learned to farm thoughts. Now we had to learn to farm ourselves.